So many believed that the digital realm would be a place for hope and idealism. But as billion-dollar fines from the EU testify, the digital giants have used their monopoly power to generate ever greater profits and squeeze out competitors, while at the same time paying little or no tax. Does the dominance of these new corporations necessarily make them dangerous? Can we break them up or regulate them to end their monopoly? Or with plans for new taxes failing, is it already too late for national governments to take control? To my left, we've got Phillip Blond. He is a political philosopher, Anglican theologian, and is director of the ResPublica think tank. Moving to our right, we have Anatole Kaletsky. He's an economist and writer. Born in the Soviet Union, Anatole learned his trade at Cambridge and Harvard. He has since been the Times' economic editor and now works as a columnist for Reuters. And last but definitely not least, we have Nicky Morgan. She's a Conservative MP and former lawyer. So the big question to remind us all is, does the dominance of the digital giants necessarily make them dangerous? You have 3 minutes.
Undoubtedly it does. One of the great tragedies of the Conservative ascendancy over the past years in the UK is that we haven't rethought competition law. And for a supposedly free market party, we have presided over the most astonishing market concentrations that we've arguably ever witnessed. It's far greater than the Edwardian period, for instance. And as a result, we've introduced not just oligopolies, but monopolies. And tragically, we don't recognise them as such. And part of that is because our competition law is out of date and it actually runs on a pro-monopoly model. So we have what's called consumer welfare as the ultimate standard for assessing market concentration. But the point is if we have this one business that does everything for everyone always, think Amazon's ambitions, that will deliver consumer welfare because it has the economies of scale, it can deliver you things far cheaper than anybody else. And that's been our competition law. So consequently, we've let mergers through, we've celebrated what we should decry. And we are creating a new form of feudalism. Now, if you cast your mind back to the Middle Ages, as I know many of you do, in the Middle Ages, the feudal-serf relationship was quite interesting. Serfs could actually make a surplus. They would work the land, and once they had paid the rent to the lord, that surplus belonged to them. The modern feudalism that we are now looking at is there was no surplus at all for any workers. That all the returns from the undoubted innovations technology brings goes to the owners of that tech. And they are creating a world in which there is no asset for you. And because there is no asset or no ownership for you, because all of our businesses are being put out of business by the new monopolies, there is no conservative route to self-emancipation. I believe that properly figured, the market economy will empower people through ownership, through business ownership, and will be an agent of redistribution. That is now fanciful in the face of the new monopolies and the new politics, in my view, of the emancipatory right, if I can use that conjunction, has to be the restoration of market power, not just to consumers, but to the producers who are denied access to the market and who are forever going to be trapped in the new rentier economy and will never own. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nicky, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the organisers the opportunity to be here today. You mentioned I'm a lawyer, so I shall do what lawyers always do, which is go back to definitions. And let's think what we mean by dangerous. What we mean by dangerous is something that causes harm or has adverse consequences. Now, I'm not going to go on quite the historical tour that Phillip has just done, but I absolutely agree with so much of what he has said. Last week in Parliament, I'm part of a group of Conservative MPs who relaunched One Nationism. We set out a declaration of values, and one of the things we put in there about markets in the economy was the need to break monopolies and to enhance competition. And I think that the tech giants absolutely should be front and centre in terms of the way that the government of the day, my party, is thinking about this issue. There's a few things that really concern me, both as a former minister, chair of the Treasury Select Committee, but also as a constituency member of Parliament. The first, undoubtedly, is the financial power of our tech giants, just the size of them. I was reading something this morning that said Amazon, the size of Amazon, the turnover, is greater than the size, for example, of the Portuguese economy. Now, you might not think the Portuguese economy is one of those great wonders of the world, but when you've got one company whose economy or turnover is bigger than a country's, it becomes harder and harder, we're going to come on to this, to talk about governments being able to regulate and to tackle. The next thing is undoubtedly the cyber risks. You know, data is the new natural resource. And actually, the risks, whether it's Cambridge Analytica, the misuse of data, or the illegal harvesting of data and the use of our data, I don't think we are nearly protective enough about the data that we give to these tech giants that they use for their own commercial benefits. You know, a couple of years ago, Parliament email and many other organisations' emails have been hacked and brought down. Now, actually, as my colleague Jess Phillips so wonderfully said, if whoever it was wanted to deal with our constituency emails, our potholes, our benefit queries and everything else for a week, fine. They didn't want to do that. But the point is actually to bring down large organisations, including our Parliament's emails, just shows the cyber risks that are out there, and that again are our tech giants showing the responsibility that they should do. There's a social power issue as well. When I was Education Secretary, I spent a lot of my time thinking about well-being, about mental health, about character of young people who want to develop. If we're having to give young people, not just young but often older as well, but young people lessons in how to deal with the issues around social media, the fact that actually your friends online are not necessarily friends in real life, they're not people who actually have your best interests at heart, then that tells me something has gone wrong with the tech that we're all using. Let alone the fact that we've also given a platform. These organisations are, they are publishers now, but they're platforms for often illegal and extremely harmful activity. Witness the recent Christchurch killings, where the killer decided to broadcast live what he was doing on Facebook, and it took Facebook far too long, well, it shouldn't be up there in the first place, but far too long to get it down as it was being broadcast. And then finally, I think we'll come on to the effects on democracy. You know, we see elections now consistently undermined by what's going on online. In the UK, obviously, we've had the recent online harms white paper. We had the Furman review as well. I think the era of self-regulation is very much over, but there's no doubt that governments are playing catch-up on this issue. And finally, I think we just need to think about, this is reminiscent of the financial crisis. There was a big debate about financial regulation, sort of light touch, self-regulation, and governments caught up too late to the dangers of that. And we saw a financial and banking crisis that we are still seeing the effects of over 10 years later. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are some advantages. There are some ways of tackling. We can talk perhaps about the GDPR from the EU and some of the regulations that Margrethe Vestager, for example, is taking in relation to tackling competition. But there are probably, in this audience and elsewhere, many startups, charities and others who benefit enormously from the power of online, the power to use the Amazon marketplace, the power to publicise through Facebook. So the question is, how do you harness the potential for good whilst also being very realistic about the ability and the desire to tackle the harms?
Thanks so much. Anatole.
Well, I agree with a lot of pretty much everything we've just heard from the other two speakers, with a slight exception of a couple of points that Philip made. But I think we should be careful not to overstate the case. For example, I think the title of this talk, The New Mafia, I think gives a false impression of the kind of danger that society faces from these organizations. And also, if we want to find something constructive and positive to do in response, I think it's important to distinguish between a number of actual and potential harms, all of which require rather different responses from society.
For more debates, talks and interviews, subscribe today to the Institute of Art and Ideas at IAI TV.